Today, man, I think we're turning the tables today because normally you're interviewing people, and today I get to interview you. I'm sitting down with Jimmy Hernandez, who is, if you haven't heard or tuned into KKUP in his radio station, you hear his voice on the airwaves. But he also has a pretty amazing shop at the Berryessa Flea Market called Time Warp Records. And I believe you used to have a shop on Santa Clara Street.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I usually start off with this. Are you originally from San Jose?
No.
Okay, so where did you?
So I moved to San Jose December of 1972.
Okay.
I was still in high school. I hated moving up here. You know, you leave all your friends and everything behind.
Yeah. Where'd you come from?
At that time we were living around Norwalk.
Okay.
But I was born in Southgate, but lived in Compton my early life. And I went to school in Compton at the elementary school, same place Brenton Wood was at. And my brothers were friends with Brenton Wood when he was at Ralph Bunch Junior High School. And they were always involved in music, right into music. So that's where I started growing up with the sound and the cars. My brother became a painter, real well known in LA as painting. And he ended up joining the Dukes down in Southern California and became, one of the top painters in the LA area, him and Fernando and Julio, all them painting cars. And then he worked for a shop in Long Beach for a while. But my mom moved up here because her mom lived here. My mom's family lived in San Jose. And I had visited San Jose during the years, visiting my grandma that lived here, right over here in Santa Clara off of the Alameda.
Okay.
And then I remember driving into San Jose, on the road trips here, meeting with my cousins. And then summertime, they were like, we got to go to work today. What do you mean you got to go to work? We got to go work. We got to go pick prunes. Pick prunes? Who does that? My jobs in school were throwing the newspapers and stuff like that. And I guess I'm pretty fortunate. I didn't have to go out there and work in the fields and be out there in the heat and sweat. But anyway, we moved here late 72, and I lived on the Campbell side. My mom was trying to get me out of the LA environment because there was a lot of stuff going on down there. And, a lot of the people were, I don't want to say all gang, but a lot of violence, things that were going on. People, just as before the Chicano moratorium, so there was a lot of racial issues down there. Because my mom had moved to what was more like the white side of town. And, I was getting called names. I was one of the very few Mexicans in a white school. And so I was always getting into fights with kids and always sticking up for other people, like little young Mexicans getting into fights. And I'd get in there, hey, what are you picking on him? We boom, 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 we're throwing blows. And I end up in the principal's office. So my mom wanted to get me out of that environment. And when she moved over here, getting more into San Jose, and I didn't know about the east side. My brother wanted to get another car. He had got out of the Army, and he was willing to give up his car. And I said, Mom, I'll take that car. It was a 54 Bel Air hardtop. And at that time, my stepdad said, you sure you want that car? It's old. I said, no, I want it. So I'm driving around a Bel Air hardtop with 520s and rims.
Yeah.
My cousins lived over here and went to Lincoln High School and San Jose High School, and we're like, man, you need to drop that thing in the front. You're sitting, that LA style doesn't get it here, but everybody kind of liked it. And that's when new style was birthing.
Right. Yeah. So that's interesting because you said you come in at 72.
Right.
So you're coming in like right when lowriding is starting to take off in San Jose, right?
Yeah.
You also had this influence from LA that you've already seen it.
Yes.
Okay.
And the cars that were here in San Jose, there was lowriders here. My first car was not that 54 Bel Air hardtop. It was a 62 Falcon. But I had an 8-track player in it. We used to cruise around St. James Park, me and my cousins. And when I got to 54 later, I started discovering the east side more. We went away from downtown into the east side and started running into other lowriders. But then again, there was very few bombs. Chicano's Pride was just about to start around 75, 76.
Right.
So I ran into another guy who was from Greenfield, and we started kind of hanging out together. And he had a 50 business coupe. I had my 54. And I started discovering Story and King, cruising around. Yeah. Welch Park, La Raza Park was on Sundays down there on the other side of Hellier. And all the places people used to just go. I drive that 54 everywhere. And of course, I was at a school. I was at Camden High School. I was the only 54 in that lowrider in that parking lot. And other lowriders that were around were driving Ansons with 50s on them,
Yeah.
raked.
Yeah.
So my car was different.
So you said that you had a. So for those that don't know, what is an LA drop as compared to how you
It's
said that?
lowered in the back.
Only, right?
Yeah, and the front stays the same. So you just have a drop in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way cars were driving in LA at the time. They were not lowering their back, their fronts, maybe a little.
And that's static lowered, right? Just by messing with the leaf springs, or
Yeah, or turning leaf springs upside down, or put cement bags in your trunk to keep the lower the back down.
Mm-hmm.
It was an experience. I can't replicate it. You're never going to replicate the way Story and King was back in the day. Yeah. And that's where we ran across Teen Angel.
Okay.
This Teen Angel started showing up on Story and King, and he had a 54, I believe 54 or 53, white tuck and roll, aqua blue and white. Mine was light blue and white, and he had these. I remember he had those dingle balls on it, and he had the fur around the mirror. Like Cheech and Chong says,
yeah.
Fuzzy dice around the mirror, dingle balls, and and the pipe organ speakers in the back.
Okay.
And he gets out of the car. My friend Art, we look at him. We're like, "Who is this guy?" Came out of the 50s, cigarettes rolled up on his arm. Started talking with a heavy accent. Hey, he says, "What's happening?" And Art and I were like normal. My wife always laughed at me because she said, when I met you, you had your car, but you had long hair, you wore bright white T-shirts, and you had jeans, bell-bottom jeans on. I never got into the cholo look. My brothers wore khakis. I never wore khakis. Yeah. My friend Art was straight up khakis in a Pendleton, buttoned up at the top, straight down. We were the opposites of each other. But we both had that passion for lowriding and music. And at that time, I was making some pretty good oldie 8-tracks. He'd play them in his car, cruise around. He was like one of the first guys that I know that had the powered sound. They used to sell the speakers with amps built in. And he used to blast those oldies loud and drive about 2 miles an hour down Story Road.
Yeah. So kind of quickly going back to Teen Angel, when you met him, was that already after he was a part of Lowrider Magazine? No. Or was it before? It's like when he was in San Jose living here as a muralist, you said?
Yeah, he just came in and started talking. I said, at that time, kind of simultaneously, I met Sonny Madrid kind of briefly. It wasn't as, but I knew where he was over on William Street. And I told Teen Angel, showing me some of his art, said, you should go talk to Sonny Madrid and be a part of the artwork that he's got going on. And he goes, yeah, I want to check him out. So I kind of gave him directions to Sonny's place.
Yeah, that's cool.
What happened between him and Sonny and how they hooked up, that story I really don't know a lot from. Sonny just briefly talked about that in the latter years when we started talking about his past and, his, he just was going to come out with a tribute to Teen Angel, a new magazine with a lot of Teen Angel's drawings, but he never got to see it manifest.
Oh, wow.
Okay. He was showing me all the, I asked Mario, what happened to that briefcase? Mario doesn't know. Somebody has it. But he had a lot of drawings he was putting together the old school way, because Sonny was copy and paste, cut pictures out, paste them, like the famous King of Story poster that's a cut and paste job.
Right.
That was his goal, to make a tribute and tell the story about Teen Angel and their meeting. But of course he got ill and never got to tell that story. Then I started seeing Teen Angel around everywhere, and he started running with us. We go cruising. He was right there with me and Art, and my 54, his, and Art's 50. Yeah. Then we started getting a couple other guys coming on, and then that's when Chicano's Pride actually came out. Actually, Chicano's Pride was the very first car club to host a dance at Disco East.
Okay, yeah, I definitely want to get into Disco East.
Yeah.
But I saw the flyer that they had out there. It was their first anniversary party.
Yes, because nobody was really doing anniversary dances back then. Well, they were in LA. They were doing anniversary dances in LA. But that's the first one I know of here. Now, I'm not 100% sure it didn't happen, so don't take me for, it could have happened in San Francisco for all I know. But in San Jose, that was the first one. And I remember talking to Glenn Norris, who owned Disco East, was leasing the building, because it was part of the indoor flea market, if you recall, if some people recall.
Yeah, no, I wasn't around to
Yeah, I
know
know
about
you
it.
would. Your
But
dad would know.
so where was it located? And then it was a flea market, right? A flea market enclosed building. Is that what it was?
Yes, it was. It used to be on Story and King, where the Target is now.
Okay.
It was. I can't quite farmers market or something like that before. It was a big market that didn't last. That big building became an indoor flea market.
Hmm.
So they had indoor and they had outdoor sales. And I used to go sell there with my 54. I'd make 8-tracks and go sell them out there
Oh, okay.
in the parking lot. I started selling mixed 8-tracks
Hmm.
with oldies. And then they had the disco inside on the other side, Disco East. That's what they called it. I thought, Disco East, what a weird name. Yeah. But they were trying to do music back then. And Buddy Love was the DJ. Buddy Love and Kid Kelly, which later they became real DJs on 97.7 early years. I talked to Glenn at the time. I said, hey, let me come and DJ for you in here. I was okay if you want to give it a try. So I started DJing there.
At Disco East.
Yeah, and I started playing oldies and disco. So I'd have all new disco and oldies. And my nieces would go there, and my sister-in-law, my younger sister, they were into disco and all dancing, so they'd come in there. Because you could go in there underage.
Oh, okay.
18 and over, and then they had a bar area for beer. That's all they sold was beer, not hard liquor. And, you know, they would sell like those steak fries and nachos. So it was kind of like not a roller ring, but that kind of an atmosphere, you know.
And so you were there DJing like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or what were the days?
Just Friday and Saturday nights.
Okay.
That's all they would have there. They wouldn't have Sunday nights either, and no weeknights, because the Sunday they had the flea market and it was kind of closed off. Nobody really went over to that side of the disco because it was a big building. The flea market was on one side, and the outside started getting more popular. People started selling on the outside of it.
Like in the parking lot side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chicanos Pride threw their dance there. And I said, man, we got to start inviting more clubs to come here. So that's at the time after that, Street Escorts did their anniversary dance. And it was huge, big event. A lot of people started coming out. So car clubs started bringing their events there, doing anniversary dances, hiring bands to play, you know, like back in the day, Kick In, which was early Rojas Brothers, and all these people was a different band. There was Blitz, the Stone Brown band. So they were playing, and all these bands were playing on a circuit everywhere. So you had Disco East was happening. The fairgrounds always had a dance. Every weekend a dance was going on. The Student Union at San Jose State had dances happening there. Hawaiian Gardens, which was Italian Gardens, that was a dance place. People would go and dance there. The warehouse was over on 7th Street, still there. Now it's a real warehouse, but that used to be where bands played also.
It was called the Warehouse?
It was called the Warehouse.
Oh, okay.
And again, 18 and over. And Friday nights was packed in there, Friday and Saturday nights and that's where Tower Power played years earlier, before the Lowrider started hitting the movement. And that was that had a bar on the upstairs for the over 21, and then the under 21 would be down on the bottom. So kind of what Studio 47, when it was Disco Odyssey, it was both. It was 18 and up, and then 21 and over was on one side. So a lot of these you'd see lowriders everywhere. In fact, you look at some of the early Lowrider magazines, you see a story called Boogie Nights. There's a drawing of Studio 47. It just says Boogie Nights.
Okay.
But that was the outside of the Starlight Ballroom, which was always having something going on. El Chicano played there. I remember El Chicano played there, and it was packed in there one night with El Chicano. And my brothers had come up from the Southern California, and they came by. And we went, there was another place called the Eldorado Lounge over on White Road, not White Road, on Capitol and Alum Rock, where the cemetery is. That's Alum Rock, right? Across the street, there used to be a shopping center where Albertsons used to be. Now it's condos also. There was a club in there called Eldorado. So there was a lot of hangout there.
So it almost sounds like that San Jose eventually became like a hotspot for musical groups to come through and be a stop, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously that mixes in with the lowriders, because the music that's coming out is being the soundtrack for the lowrider cruising, right?
It was just, there was always something happening in San Jose, and I can't forget La Azteca Hall. There was also the one on, I think that's the one that was on 22nd and Peach Court in that area.
Okay.
There was a little hall there. There was also the one on 7th in Santa Clara. I can't remember if that was La Azteca Hall, but there used to be a lot of dances there, an IES hall.
Yeah.
So people would go and crash parties like quinceañeras, weddings, and still you'd see lowriders show up. Because the word was, there was no social media.
Yeah.
You were just cruising Story King, and then you'd see people, where's the parties? La Azteca Hall, 22nd. There's a party on 24th and this, and there's a party. And everybody would go meet up here or cruise by to see what's happening. And there was always something happening in San Jose to go. It wasn't a night that something wasn't going on, you know. You know, the police were not that, I don't know, people say the cops gave them a bad time. I could tell you, honestly, I might have gotten pulled over one time in my life, in my 54. And one of the police were giving me a bunch of rash about it.
Yeah.
But the other policeman that was there was like, come on, let's go. He's got nothing going on.
Yeah.
You know, my friend was with me, and he was real vocal about, what do you want to look in his trunk for? You got a warrant? He goes, do I need one? I said, just let him burn off his steam. Because my brothers always taught me, like, I'll tell you, I've dealt with LA sheriffs at a very young age. And I was only like 12 years old riding a lowrider bike, and they gave me a rash and stuff. You know, I could take you in for being out here after 10 o'clock at night. We have a curfew. You get your butt home. You know, they were pretty forceful police, the sheriffs. So meeting San Jose PD, they used to tell her, these guys are nothing like LA cops, man. LA cops were pretty ruthless. They didn't care how old you were. They spoke to you like an adult. I never had language like that used. At 12 years old, I never was dropping F-bombs on me like that. My brothers wouldn't even talk like that. You know, I remember my mom getting mad at me for saying the word goddamn, and she wanted to take me in and whip me in the ass. You know, you can't be saying that to the neighbors. You know, and all my friends, ooh, you said that word. It was different, but honestly, the cops, I never had an issue with police.
So in the Disco East parking lot, I had read an article where I guess the cops wouldn't really go in there. That it was pretty much all like lowriders, and they would police themselves and kind of people that were getting crazy. They'd get them out of there. So it was a big lot too, right?
They would come in if there was an altercation, but what happened was the city kind of met with us. The mayor at that time was Janet Gray Hayes, and McNamara was the chief of police. So he had a meeting with us and talked about it. You need to have this many cops if you're going to keep this. So that's what instituted the $1 charge to get in the parking lot. So we started charging $1.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Okay.
Yeah, to pay
to the Disco East parking lot.
Yes, they would come in down on the other end by the corner, and they would come in a line and pay $1 to park. So with that $1, Glenn would pay for portable toilets to be put in there. So you wouldn't have guys urinating on the back of the stores over there. There used to be a liquor store, King of Story Liquors, right on close, and a 7-Eleven and a couple other little mom and pop shops. Taco Bell was over here. McDonald's used to be there. And guys, you know, they urinate on the back, and these owners didn't like that. So we put portable toilets in. We had to hire, I can't remember how many police, private security, well, off-duty cops. And they wouldn't infiltrate in there unless we needed them. So what I did is I got with car clubs back then to block the entrances that were like other areas where cars could come in without paying the $1. Because cars they wouldn't pay $1. They'd go and try to come through. And with that, I used to have an account set up at King of Story Liquors. I tell them, if you guys want to get a case of beer, pick it up at King of Story Liquors and tell them it's on us.
Oh, okay.
So we would provide their alcohol. Probably not the best thing to do, but said monitor yourself. Don't get too drunk. Just because it's free beer, don't get yourself where you can't drive. The last thing we want is for you to wreck one of your beautiful cars out there. And most guys back then respected their cars. They weren't going to get that buzz. They don't want to wreck their vehicles. Or their wives would drive the car. Right. Because they would just hang out. It was like a social media live.
Yeah. So you had the club going on the inside, right? And on the outside is like a whole nother
Well,
event that's going on.
actually, technically, the club, what happened with the club is the city took away the dance permit.
Okay.
So that ended the inside.
I see.
That was going for a little while, but people were hanging on the outside. They didn't want to pay the $2 or $3 to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So when they took the dance permit away, we couldn't have dances anymore. We did away with the disco, and we said, man, people were still coming parking. So we started organizing the parking lot, and at the same time that happened. If you recall a video that was floating around there with Rachel Flores, Rachel was the original Lowrider Council. She was the head of it.
Yeah, it was the Concilio, right? Was it called the Lowrider Concilio?
It might have been.
Chicano's Pride was telling me about something like that.
Who was?
Daniel Arroyo, who's part of Chicano's Pride.
Oh, yeah.
That day, when he was a part of that original Concilio.
Well, she was part of the Sophisticated Ladies Car Club.
Okay.
She organized and started meeting with the mayor and the city and the police and trying to make cruising legal back then, not harassing. And it was like bumper to bumper traffic in King and Story. Remember, there was no overpasses on 680 and 101. Mm-hmm. So the only way, if you're coming north on 101 and you want to go to Sacramento, you had to get off on Story Road, go to King, make a left, get on 680 and continue. Yeah. And vice versa. If you're coming from Sac area and you want to go south on 101, you got to get off King Road, go down the Story, make a right, get on 101 and continue. Oh, man. So that created a traffic nightmare. You weren't even moving because cars were just like bumper to bumper. Kind of like that scene on Boulevard Nights where Danny and the guys from 11th Street are looking at each other face to face. That's the way it was. Yeah. But only throw in the mix that I remember seeing an RV with the kids looking out the window at all, their eyes all bugged out at all the cars in the street and everybody cruising, And then you got bicycles going in between the cars, cruising up and down, on a bike because, these kids didn't have cars, so they would go cruise around on their bikes. And, you'd have a couple guys didn't get along with each other and you have fights break out. Mm-hmm. And then that's why the police didn't like it because they couldn't get to everybody because a fight could break out and there's no way for the police to get their cars in there because it was a nightmare. It was a mess. So she tried to organize off-site places and it just happened at the same time Disco East became the perfect parking lot. And again, not just Disco East, you had behind Jack in the Box, that parking lot. Mm-hmm. Tropicana parking lot became full. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people said, oh man, Disco East, there was stabbings, there was fighting. I said, no, there was fights, but never a stabbing. Mm-hmm. That happened at Tropicana because Tropicana, now remember, you have the Mexican crowd that go to Tropicana, the Mexican music, and then you'd have lowriders mixed there, and beef would break out. Yeah. Is some of those guys are protected with their ladies, and somebody would say something, and then next thing you know, there's fights going on with people. And not to mention just Tropicana alone had their own little issues going on with a lot of, people coming out of there fighting with each other. Mm-hmm. But there was never a shooting. It was always respectable fist to fist, and that was it. It was over. You'd shake hands, and it was over.
So in those parking lots that you're describing, like when you hear, so there's this other podcast called Drifting on Memories, and it chronicles a lot of LA culture, pretty much just like we're doing here. And that's what inspired me to do these interviews, right, with San Jose culture. But over there, it sounded like every parking lot belonged to a specific car club. But in San Jose, it sounds like everything was mixed in.
It was never.
It was just a big free for all show, like park where you can park and show off your car.
Yeah. And if you couldn't park, you just cruise to the parking lot. But you were in the parking lot. The guys liked being in there because there was no police pulling in. In fact, I remember guys coming from Salinas and San Diego and from up north, Vallejo and San Francisco. Hey, I heard you could throw your lifts here in San Jose and they don't bother you. I said, nope, that can't be because in LA and San Diego, they bust us for hydraulics. Hydraulics were illegal down in Southern California. I remember my brother being pulled over back in the 60s. He had a 52 Chevy and the cop pulled him over because he said, you have hydraulics. He goes, no, I don't. I just seen you. He said, no, my car's that low. Okay, well, I'm going to have to give you a ticket because you're I think he put something under their forefingers or something, and he was lower. Gave him a ticket. Then you go down, you have it lifted up and get it signed off. You know, there was ways around it.
Yeah.
But in San Jose, the police were not knowledgeable about that yet.
Interesting.
So they were not, enforcing it. Mm-hmm. And what had happened in LA is a couple of cars would drop their cars so low, the gas tanks would explode. And they would have problems. That's why they were outlawing it, because it was dangerous. And it was the early stages of hydraulics, and people were not taking safety. Right. And people were getting hurt, Yeah.
Yeah.
Things. So it was, but yeah, there was not a club territory, and Story and King didn't belong to anybody. Mm-hmm. It was, clubs got along with everybody. Just like you see Teen Angels, one of his drawings where they're at the park and all the car clubs are together. Mm-hmm. That's the way it was at Story and King. You had guys from California Style, California Stepside, Chicano's Pride, Uniques, 62 Realistics. A lot of clubs were all out there just together, just socializing, talking. Mm-hmm. One of my friends, Jesus Flores, has a lot of footage of that.
Oh, yeah?
But he's never been able to. I tell you, I'm going to bug him again. So you need to put that footage into a DVD. People welcome people from San Francisco, from down south, from Vallejo. Nobody had beef with anybody over here. I even used to go to Union City at times, and San Jose, in Dakota, they had events going on there. There was never a problem over there. Yeah. And now San Diego's at the last stages of legalizing, taking down repealing their cruising zone there. Yeah. I was talking to Javier, the X-Man, about it, and they're taking the signs, but there's a couple of steps before they get there. Mm-hmm. But they're getting close to it now. Yeah. I think people have become, it's acceptable, right? It's just like tattoos were not acceptable in the workforce, but now you work with people with tattoos on their necks. You go, we go to a restaurant, I see a waitress with tattoos. That used to not be acceptable.
Right.
Earrings in guys. I remember goatees at work were not legal, but now
things are changing now.
People have changed and accept people for who they are and what they do. And I think people are starting to get the picture now that lowriders are not gangbangers. Mm-hmm. They're just like everybody else. Yeah. It's just a hobby. It's no different than a hot rod guy, Mm-hmm. And my older brother used to take his cars to hot rod shows. Nobody took 39 Chevys to hot rod shows. Not that we're lowriders. Mm. They were racing coupes, but when they saw his car, he won purses like $500, $1,000, and then he started, lowrider don't pay nothing for their shows. And he's like, I'm going to build a hot rod. He was going to build a Model T and take it to hot rod shows because people were not appreciative. And I'll use the word appreciative of the art because it is an art. Mm-hmm. And this artist first name is Carlos, was over at my place at the flea market talking about, I wish people would appreciate Chicano artists because I have a few pieces of art in my store from Mike Rios, and people kind of step back when I tell them the price of it, and they're like, God, that's a lot of money. And I said, Mike Rios is getting 10 times as much for that same piece of art in other places. Right. So he allows me to sell his stuff so that everybody can get a piece of that art and appreciate it.
Well, it's pretty cool that your shop allows people to have access to this art, right? It's not in a gallery, you know what I mean, or a traditional setting where you go in and buy something off the wall, but your shop is like this collection of Chicano art, music, just culture. It's been around forever. I used to go there, back when I was in high school and just looking for CDs and whatnot. And it's pretty cool that you have that space there. And you've had it for how many years, right? Since before it was in Santa Clara Street.
30 years. No, it was there before Santa Clara Street.
Oh, okay.
Santa Clara Street became what I wanted to open from the flea market.
Okay.
But I remember John, and if you went there as a kid, you remember John used to sell the East Side Stories over on the other side of the market. Mm-hmm. He always had the cassettes of the East Side Story and the vinyl. The vinyl everybody's after now. Yeah. And he told me, don't ever give up your shop and don't make the mistake of opening a business outside and forget about the flea market because this will always be your home base and where people know you.
I see.
And he was right. Yeah. Because it takes a lot for a person to get out, go somewhere and get out of their car and go stop.
Mm-hmm.
But at the flea market, the biggest thing in the market, you know, and in all my years of working for Pepsi in this business and marketing and things I learned at San Jose State, impulse buying is the biggest way people purchase. Mm-hmm. That's why people say, why do you play your music like that? I said, it's my fishing line. People go by and hear a song and they come in, what are you playing? Mm-hmm. That's why I have such an appreciation of this radio, because I get to play what I want, man. I talked to Javier and Chewy and Tony, you know, they became friends over the years. Mm-hmm. And I met them through Time Warp. Okay. Because they heard about it. Yeah. And they're like, I got to get some music. Actually, they heard me at San Jose State. And when we were doing San Jose State, what San Jose doesn't know is Radio Aztlán was bigger than all the radio stations in the Bay Area.
Man, I remember listening to that, man.
Yeah. It was bigger than Wild, bigger than KMEL. This was the biggest radio station in Northern California. Mm-hmm. Because we used to get invited to car shows. They wanted us there. Yeah. And we used to have lines of people writing down their dedications so that we could read them over the air. So they could hear, because
it had a big reach too, right? Didn't it?
Oh yeah. It goes pretty far. The signal is strong. I remember Javier telling me, the station manager said, "Who the hell was Time Warp Music? Who are they?" Mm-hmm. And Javier started to tell him, "Well, we're a little store in San Jose," and he's like, "How the hell did they outshine us at Cinco de Mayo? We had like a 6-wide booth, nonstop selling mixtapes. Yeah. And they had one booth with Jazzy Jim spinning and Jose Melendez and their Wild 94.9's posters. They didn't have hardly anybody there." And we started doing our stuff there. We had Live in the Mix there doing our stuff. And mm-hmm. people were gathering around our booth, dancing in front of it. GI Forum used to hate us. Your dad knows. Yeah. Your dad was around. He was running security back then. Yeah. And they used to say, "You guys got to turn that music down." And people would shout, "Hey, turn it up." They wanted to dance, you know. And they were, you know, Cinco de Mayo, they were playing mariachi. They were playing a lot of but the youth wanted that, you know, music like Wild played. Like the house music was big and freestyle, old school freestyle was huge. Yeah. And remember, Wild was not playing freestyle. We were playing freestyle. KSJS was doing freestyle before Wild. That's how I started to meet Javier and Chewy and those guys. They were like, "Where do you guys get a lot of your music?" And, you know, and I started becoming friends with them. And then Javier did the oldies show, and I started helping him with music, giving him CDs of play these songs, play that. And he used to say, "I don't know, man, I can't play that song." I said, "Play it, dude. This song is a proven winner." And it was funny, one time he didn't want to play Olivia by the Whispers, and then this lady called and she said, "Can you play that song, Olivia? My sister's name's Olivia, and she passed away, and I'd sure love to hear that song." And he looked at me, "Did you set this up?" I said, "No, I didn't. It's on that CD I gave him." He played it. Oh, wow. And the phones lit up. I said, "This is the kind of oldies you got to play. Quit playing Angel Baby. Quit playing Natural High. Bloodstone has so much music, and you're playing Natural High. You're playing La 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 Means I Love You by the Delphonics. There's so many other songs for that."
Kind of getting into radio a little bit. I grew up listening to Radio Aztlán. If we look back at the 70s when lowriding was happening, were there radio stations that were dedicated to that they knew cruising was happening in San Jose, so they would play music?
Radio Aztlán was already
there.
Already there.
So that was the main one.
It was already going, and it was only Friday nights. It was traditional, oldies, and freestyle. And that was Carlos Diaz. I got to give him credit. He brought that freestyle sound to San Jose, was real big in that. And we just expanded. So I remember having freestyle artists at the station because no stations were recognizing Connie and Sapphire and Trenier. All these artists didn't have, you know, radio stations have interviews with hip hop artists and all these. Right. We were a college station, but we were well known. If we had streaming back then, that station would have been way bigger than it was.
So kind of going back into musical acts, you were involved with the first was it international lowrider show that happened at the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
Right? What was your involvement in that?
So that was a 3-day show.
Mm-hmm.
And Manuel financed a lot of that show for Sonny back then.
Oh, wow.
They invited me to come because I was DJing at Disco East. In fact, there's a write-up in there about Disco East.
In the program?
Yes.
Okay, I have that program, so I'll have to check it out.
And it says I was invited. At that time, I was going by the Memory Maker.
Okay.
Because I was playing today's songs and mixing them with oldies. I was mixing oldies and disco.
And disco together.
Because that's what made lowriders kind of, they're out there dancing away to Chic, La Freak, and all, and then all of a sudden they hear Shotgun, and they're still dancing.
Yeah.
And anyway, they invited me to sit in the auditorium on the stage and did music right there. And I had already started working with Vern Brooks, who does sound, and still today doing it, doing some gigs when mobile DJs started coming out at the same time. His brother-in-law would bring me big old speakers and set up turntables, and I'd play music at the Golf San Jose Country Club out on the other side of town, bowling alleys for New Year's Eve parties and birthday parties at these big halls where you needed big sound. And we had a disco going on. Viney hired me to do some of her shows. So I remember New Year's Eve at the fairgrounds DJing with Bloodstone there.
Oh, wow.
And Vern was doing the sound for her, and then I was in the center of that big auditorium, Expo Hall, playing disco. And we hooked up a big mirror ball light and everything, and I said, disco comes to the Santa Clara County Fairgrounds, and we put an explosion effect. And I busted out Rick James, You and I, and people were like yelling out, dancing out in the middle, crazy. It was like stuff. So I started doing mobile DJing kind of ahead of the other mobile DJ guys that were doing it.
Okay.
They were perfecting it. And that's when everybody was trying to learn how to mix it. Like Nitro Nick was at Studio 47. I used to go there and I used to hear him doing, oh, this guy's tripping out. He's doing, it's called La Freak, La Freak, La Freak. He was starting to do a lot of record tricks. So it was starting to come out. Everybody was mixing music back then.
That's crazy.
But that was a good show. I remember being there, seeing a lot of celebrities at that event.
Yeah, so can you describe that 78 show? So I guess I have two questions. What was the vibe like leading up to the show? Was there a lot of excitement in San Jose, or was it kind of just like, oh, it's another show that's happening?
No, it was one of the very first shows of that level in Northern California. Now remember, LA was having big shows back then. Right. And Lowrider Magazine was an embryo, just coming out. So this was a Lowrider Magazine first ever show in the Bay Area. I believe Texas had one prior to that one. I might be mistaken, but I thought Texas had one that same year. Okay. But this one, Manuel got involved with it, and they put a lot of money into it.
Yeah, because I know cars from like LA came up.
Oh, yeah.
There's photos of them on like double-decker transports.
That's one of the things I shared with Gilbert, because Gilbert, and I shared it with Mark. You know Mark from Impala's magazine? Yeah. So I told him, you guys got to do what Sonny did. It's time for you to take car shows to the next level. And I told Gilbert at Sonny's funeral, I said, talking to Sonny talked about you too. Sonny said, I hope Gilbert realizes the potential Street Low has before somebody snags it and runs away with it. Because that's what people do, right? They steal our culture and capitalize on what we lag on. Right. Because we're too busy trying to pull each other down. I said, you know, Sonny paid for the Dukes to come up here. He goes, he did? He never told me that. I said, yeah, my brother was in the car club. Oh, wow. And they paid to bring their cars on transports because Sonny wanted those cars here in Northern California because nobody was doing that. Nobody was getting the cars here from outside of whatever you see on cruise nights in San Jose. Right.
Man, so it was like a huge effort just to, I guess making the show at the fairgrounds is probably a normal thing, right? Because Binding was doing it, and you guys were having other car show music events there. So logistically, doing that is probably relatively straightforward. But what the vision was of what Sonny and the folks part of the magazine was to really make it an international type of feel, right? Where there's
Right.
cars from all over, literally here in San Jose.
Make it like the Rod and Customs, like
Yeah.
the way I remember car shows back in the day were, they used to bring, and I remember Sonny called them Lowrider happenings.
Mm-hmm.
And because it brought people from all over the place. I remember meeting people from everywhere there. And he also was on the, we talked about it, bringing famous cars that people will pay to go see. Because I hear people tell me, I'm not going to Street Level Show. I see those cars cruising next week.
Right.
You don't have to pay to go see them.
Right.
And I told Gilbert, you need to take some lessons from what Sonny did and build on that if you want to take it there. And he started bringing like the Midnighters, Ramon Ayala, and bringing some different acts in, like he's doing Confunction next month. And then I told Mark, bring some famous cars when you do your shows. Don't just think about. Remember, Lowrider happenings were for families, not bikini girls. I don't want to say it polluted the car show. I said, Mark, you should bring some people that are known. Bring something for kids. Bring the Batmobile. Bring that Thomas the Train. Bring things that kids like.
Right.
But he did. He brought Gypsy Rose's car out there to the one he did here in San Jose, if you remember that one. And he started bringing stuff different, bringing bigger acts. SOS band, Rolls Royce. And if you want to bring a local band, bring a local band too. I mean, Sonny always did a lot for local music as well. He tied it into the shows real well. That's why when I talked to Sonny's sister, I said, you guys rushed to that Sonny Memorial car show. You shouldn't have rushed so fast with it. You should have planned it. Should have talked to Tierra, Malo, a lot of bands that Sonny helped. Sonny helped Tierra make it where they did because he was putting them in the magazine. They were getting well known across the Southwest because Sonny's magazine, who's Tierra? And they started following Tierra. And it got them well known. So, those are things that we got to learn from, how to take it to another level, a stronger thing.
So one thing I really wanted to ask you a question on, because I've always seen this photo floating around on Instagram and Facebook, and even if you Google it, it's you, Sonny Madrid, and Gloria, who was the first cover model of the first issue. You're in your shop. How did that happen? Like, what was that? Was that something that you organized to have them come in, and it was just random, or because that's such a beautiful photo to see.
So it just was coincidence. In fact, I touched on the full story on an earlier post years ago. So it was Mother's Day, and I had never met Gloria before then, but her kids had come into the store. In fact, her son was just at the store a few weeks ago. And at that time, Sonny was bringing. So going back to the poster, Sonny was making calendars because Sonny has always been into tinkering with something. Even though he was not with Lowrider Magazine anymore, he was always doing something to keep him busy, make a few bucks, beer money, so to speak. And he made these calendars with you go to the bakeries and they have the Aztec picture and the calendars on the bottom, tearaway. So he started making posters like that with the Aztec gods of the six suns and explaining what they were. But the pictures were, they were so-so. But then he did the one with Saurian King, that Saurian King one that's still around today. And this is going back almost 20 years ago. And he brought me some at the last part of the year, and the year passed, that year was over, and I started messing with the calendar, and I went, man, I could peel these off. It's a pretty good poster by itself. And I put it in a frame. I still have it. And everybody wanted it.
That's the one you're talking about is it's kind of like watercolor, right? Where there's a Saurian King sign. I think there's a bomb, like a red bomb on it.
Yeah, it's copy and paste if you look at it closely. It took Joe Hernandez's picture of Disco East and cut that out and pasted it on paper with all these other little pictures that Sonny drew some of them himself, and he just took clippings from Joe and different, and he put it in there. I don't know. Did you ever see Disco East, the one that Joe did? That poster?
Yeah, it's like a double spread.
It's on volume 7, number 7 of the first issue with Chicano Pride's coming down the hill.
Right.
I told him, Sonny, this is what everybody wants. Forget that other stuff. Nobody wants to learn about Aztec culture. Do what makes you money. He goes, you think I should make the covers? Start making the covers, start making pictures. And lo and behold, he started doing that, and they started selling. You know, he gave them to me for $3, I sell them for $5. And I just was flipping posters. So that particular day he came to replenish me with more posters. And it happened to be Mother's Day. And Gloria's kids brought her to Time Warp to show her Time Warp, because she had never been there either. And she wanted to see the poster that had her picture on it, because her kids bought one. I was like shocked. She walked in with him, and then Sonny happened to show up. I said, do you remember this guy? And they started talking, and it was like a reunion. Wow. And it became a free cultural event, because everybody that was there, I sold out of that poster. And the good thing Sonny brought a stack of them, because we started selling them. And I said, have Gloria sign it, and Sonny sign your posters, because this is the first lady to ever pose on Lowrider Magazine. And she just kind of smiled and goes, I am, huh? I go, you are. You're the first Lowrider girl. And I asked her the question, because this question came up. Who took the picture? Because are you familiar with David Nunes?
Yeah.
He passed away a few years ago, too, from stomach cancer. His wife believed he was the photographer of that picture, and Sonny never gave him credit. What happened was, when she was there, I told her, who took the picture? She goes, he did.
Sonny did?
Sonny took it, but she couldn't, Sonny couldn't even remember.
Wow.
And
wow.
She said, he took my picture. And you had your back? Yeah, I didn't want him to show my stomach, because I was pregnant with him. She pointed to her son. So I didn't want my belly showing. So he said, turn around and show me your jacket. So she's pregnant. Yeah. By her car. And that's how that picture was taken.
Wow, that's crazy, man. To even think that you have such an iconic magazine, and it's really about cars, you know, at the end of the day, but it's like you're featuring this woman in this powerful pose, showing off this car club plaque on the back. It was a new image, I think.
Yeah.
And then just to hear the backstory, man, it's just, that is so incredible.
It was a great moment. So everybody that was there, can I buy one of those posters? And then I should have took more pictures of Gloria signing, Gloria and Sonny, but it got so packed with people, because everybody
found out, wanted
to get her to sign it and Sonny to sign him. So a few people out there got that double signature poster. Wow. That was out there, you know. And that picture, the reason it got known is because Hemmings Magazine, when Sonny passed away, and they hit me up for a story about Sonny. But I didn't say anything. I said, you know what? You need to talk to Mario. I pointed him to Mario's direction, because I told him, it's not my place. That's his dad. Let him tell the story. Yeah. And Mario always appreciated that I didn't try to take the limelight, because everybody tries to tell the story, right? Everybody tries to be the one. I'm the one who knows. Don't talk to that crab. Don't talk to that crab. Talk to me. You know. But I'd rather see the story go forth. Even my daughter, when they did the Lowrider first exhibit, she goes, Dad, say something. Go out there and do it. And I said, as long as it gets going, because the further it goes, it gets other people inspired to do things with the culture, with the history, and to share the stories. Kind of like what you're doing right now. You're sharing the stories. Or they pick up a portion that somebody's not capturing, you know. Like you said, you're trying to do what Drifting on a Memory is doing in Southern California, you're trying to do here. And LA's going through their own kind of divisions there of people trying to tell the story of which Lowrider magazine is which, and who's telling the story, you know, of what's happening. And a lot of it's around the Duke's 60th anniversary event, which we're going to be at. We're going to that. I remember hanging out at their shops over there in San Pedro, in that little store. And,
the Ruelas brothers.
Yeah, hanging out with those guys. And Julio used to hit me up about oldies back then.
Yeah.
He used to go, where'd you get your oldies at? You know, and he used to sell his oldies to some of my friends, bought oldies from him. And
Oh, man, that's cool.
I said, damn, he's gouging you for those oldies. Why is he charging so much? So it was like, you know, I got to share some oldies with him too.
So you mentioned earlier about Raza Park and how that was kind of like an offshoot of Hellier Park. I think it's like around the bend, right? You have to drive up the street a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've heard, it's kind of like the cops left you alone over there. But more importantly, how did you get the sign for Raza Park? You have like the wooden. You actually have the wooden carved sign. I think is it in your shop? Or,
Yeah. So and I actually lent it to the library
Yeah.
for the when they did the exhibit, and when they build the final exhibit or the Lowrider exhibition, they want to build a room that's dedicated to preserving a lot of that.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if it's going to be East Side or Lowrider.
Okay.
Because a lot of people came to me, why weren't you at the East Side story thing? And I said, because I'm not from the East Side.
Mm.
I lived on the West Side. As long as somebody's doing something,
Yeah,
that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But so La Raza Park became the Sunday hangout when people used to go there after a long Saturday night. Some people never slept. They ended up at La Raza Park at 6 o'clock. You could buy beer at the 7-Eleven and pull into the La Raza Park and hang out there and drink and barbecue all day.
Yeah.
And the cops did leave you alone, but probation officers were with binoculars looking at people down there.
Oh, really?
Watching what people were doing, because there was people on parole down there too. And then when you did pull out of La Raza Park, they were right there on Center Road waiting for you to get pulled over for something to see how much alcohol you had. Right. But it was Sunday, and then you stay there till Sunday afternoon. Go drive over and hang out at Disco East on Sunday night, because Sunday night Disco East was packed. People stayed out there too till the daylight, you know. Yeah. Not as much on Sunday, but Friday and Saturday nights it was always packed. Yeah. And when it got too big in there and overflowing, it spilled over to Welch Park, which is right off of King and Tully back in there. Mm-hmm. That used to be another park everybody hung out at. Hellier Park started closing the gate and not letting people in there anymore. That's what happened there. Okay. So that was a little hangout for a while. In fact, one of the Lowrider magazines has Joe's Mercury parked on the front cover with that Merc blue with flames on it. Okay. He had hydraulics on that Merc. Okay. But yeah, La Raza Park was there for a while. It didn't really stay long because people got tired of the cops pulling them over. They didn't want to get busted for tickets, you know, whatever the reason that was. And the sign came a few years back. This lady used to come into my store all the time, and she used to get in there and spend hours in there. She was looking for music but not always buying anything, just checking things out. And then one day she told me, you know what, I'm gonna bring you a sign I have that I'm gonna give it to you. It's from La Raza Park, and we talked a little bit. She goes, I'm moving. I'm just recovering from a bad accident, so I'm gonna give it to you. I said, I'll buy it from you if it's the sign I'm thinking it. So lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, she shows up with a wagon, and she's got that wooden La Raza Park sign. I was like, oh, wow, you weren't kidding, were you? Because I hear a lot of stories from people. Yeah. I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring you this. I'm going to bring you... And they never show up. So she started telling me why she had the sign. Her sons took it from La Raza Park. Mm-hmm. And she says, I'm moving, and I can't take this sign with me because I'm moving in with my son because I can't work anymore. I can't afford my apartment, so I'm going to live with him, but I can't take everything. And this sign belongs here because this is like a museum of culture in here, and it belongs in this store. She goes, and I know you'll be a good keeper of it. So I felt she honored me with it. And I said, I'm not going to sell this. People want to buy it. I said, nope, I'm not going to sell it. You take $1,000. Nope, I'm not going to take $1,000 for it. I'm not going to take $5,000 for it. If I do get rid of it, it's going to the library in their museum of lowrider history. And that's where it goes. They'll be the next keepers. It's not for me. I don't own this. Right. I'm the keeper right now. Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to continue the legacy. So I let her pick out a lot of CDs. I gave her a box of CDs So I've kept that sign there, you know, And it's been a part of that store for the longest time, just like some of the old 8-tracks in there,
Right.
you know, as a memory keepsake. But it was, that sign has become part of it. So back to Disco East, they did a lot of stories on Disco East too.
Yeah, I've read a few.
Yeah, Rolling Stone magazine.
Yep, that's the one.
Did a big one, and then they twisted it, man. It was not about lowriding, it was about crystal.
Right.
It was
Yeah,
about
yeah.
PCP.
Yeah, when I read that, the photos are pretty cool that they have in there. Photos I had never seen before, but because I collect magazines, right? And so I was going through one of Biney's magazines. I think it was one of the Lowrider happenings, and she references that article, and she's like, you know, San Jose is way more than what they depicted in this article, and they twisted everything about what the scene was like, and lowriding is not drugs at all, but that's the way that the article made it seem and read like.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pretty big trip. Kind of, I was able to find it and take a
Surprised
look.
you found it. You found it in hers. I've never found that Rolling Stone article, though. I've tried to find it.
I have a,
But the true article itself from
Yeah.
Rolling Stone?
yeah, it's like a big, you know,
Oh, okay.
24 by whatever. It's
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's like
Willie
a
Nelson's on
newspaper.
the cover.
So, yeah, they wrote, there was a TV show called That's Incredible with Fran Tarkenton, John Davidson, and Kathy Lee Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you could find footage on YouTube, but they did a story on cruising in San Jose. And that show was on national TV.
What year do you think that was about?
About the same year, 78,
Late
79.
70s. Okay.
And there was also Real People.
Mm-hmm.
Was another TV show that came down and did a show on low riding. And a couple Australian and German magazines, but I don't recall the names that were there that did stories on Story and King.
Disco East. And all that.
Because Story and King just became... LA was already well established for years.
Mm-hmm.
Whittier Boulevard was going on since I was in elementary school. Because I used to ride shotgun with my brothers when they were chauffeuring weddings and quinceañeras in LA, and we'd go through Whittier Boulevard cruising. He'd be in his 39 and my brother's 48 Fleet Line, and they'd cruise by. But when Disco East hit, it just ignited it more. Lowrider Magazine at the same time came out.
Mm-hmm.
So Disco East, actually, when I met with Rachel, we just kind of like, let's just make Disco East a place where people could park and stop and get off the road. You know, a lot of cars would overheat on Story and King too. You had sitting there not moving.
Yeah.
And it became kind of a place where people. So Rachel and her friends from Sophisticated Ladies would really help out a lot, because some girls would get a little bit too far gone, and they would help keep them safe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Protect them so that something would happen to these ladies, because you always got guys out there that are looking to take advantage of ladies that are messed up. You know, the police were there to help, but they would take off. If there was a fight going on at Tropicana, they were gone. That's why we had the police. And I remember seeing a lot of the clubs stopping the fights, breaking up each other. You know, the guys would want to say, no, stop. You're not going to ruin this for us. And eventually it got to the point where it was not the car clubs or the car owners. It was kids that came around throwing bottles and stuff. And that's what made Disco East go away. Mac the mayor said, that's enough. Yeah. I got hit a couple of times. I got hit with billy clubs in the arms because some of the cops were pushing people and making them move. And it's like, this lady's pregnant. She's got a stroller. Don't. Bam, here comes a billy club. But I'm trying to get her from not getting hit. Right. You know, like, please, sir, this lady, let her get her kid out of the way, you know. And you get some of them, they just want to show machoism or whatever, fear. And that doesn't work. You know, it just makes things worse. You know, I even seen it when Cinco de Mayo was like that downtown. And it got too big. Cinco de Mayo got really too big. And I think more of the policing that were there were more in fear of what could happen. Yeah. You know, the final Disco East blow was that, I mean, the final blow for downtown was when they say that riot broke out. It wasn't a riot. It was just a small handful of people that started breaking windows and stuff. And it made it, and they associated it with cruising. Right. And that's what made it all have a bad name. Right. But if we learn to police each other ourselves, peer pressure is always the best thing, you know, to keep things in control.
So I guess my last question before we wrap up here is, with all the history that San Jose has and the experience and all the things that you were involved in, what do you think is kind of like the lasting legacy of lowriding for San Jose?
It's a big question. Well, the legacy is people are still continuing to pass on that traditions to their kids. Some of the kids are embracing it. Some of it is emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you that when I was selling Lowrider magazines at the store, I got a bunch of them and I put them for sale, and people were like, "These are worth money, man. You could sell these to Japan." I said, "I'm not selling Japan any of them. That's our culture.
Yeah.
I'm not selling them our culture.
Yeah.
I'd rather give them away here to somebody." And I could tell you that in that store, I wouldn't take video because I don't think it's right. But I've seen kids and mothers break down crying because their son's in the magazine and their dad died.
Mm-hmm.
They'd never seen their dad as an older adult. They were kids when their dad died.
Mm-hmm.
To see their dad's car in there was like, it was an emotional experience for the son and the mom that were part of that. I'd rather have that than to give it to somebody in Japan that's going to flip through those pages and not know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of local car clubs found, including Chicano's Pride. I sold a few of those magazines to some of the kids of the car club members and some of the parents of that their husbands were in the club or their sons or daughters.
Yeah.
I'd rather do that because that continues the passion.
Mm-hmm.
That continues the legacy. It doesn't let it go to Japan and you'll never see it again.
Mm-hmm.
So they can only take what we're willing to give. And it's okay. I'm not saying that's wrong to cash in.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you can get $50,000, $80,000 for a car and buy yourself a house in this valley, go for it. Because you'll keep it here. Yeah. Cars will come and go. Mm-hmm. But legacies, they're only as good as the memories that people keep and how they continue on with it. Mm-hmm. And being protectors of the legacy or gatekeepers, that's what I like to do. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm a gatekeeper of the music and things. That's why I'm still involved with music and bands and trying to find a history of Chicano music back in the day. And not just that, but Chicano music in the past. There was a lot of Chicanos that did music in the 50s and 60s besides Richie Valens that never got the recognition. And it goes hand in hand with lowriding. It makes it like part of the culture. Yeah. Lowriding has just made it more like it's a subtle life. It's an easy life. Enjoy it because I'm sure to carry on long after I'm gone. The cars may float like some of your pictures you made, but yeah. At least it'll go on, Yeah.
That's awesome, Jimmy, man. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit down with me and get some of your history and a lot of things that I've never heard and kind of just adding to the collective history and impact of San Jose culture. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. Anytime.